During World War I, a lot of people made a lot of money because, we're selling arms to the Allies and stuff, and that money trickles down somewhat into the public. They gave certain special deals to certain things. The farmers became fairly well off during the war years, and certain businessmen became well off, and they can't stand that. They can't stand the idea that the little guys have money. They want to have all the money for themselves. So then they manufactured the Great Depression. First of all, they made money cheap. They encouraged it. They're the president encouraging people to invest in the stock market, even though the insiders knew that they were going to burst this bubble. On that Black Friday, they cranked the call thing up to 20%. And like Eustace Mullins just got a dry sense of humor, and he says that left a lot of speculators with only one option: to jump out of windows. There were a lot of them that did that. And how they can get away with doing this kind of stuff, he also documents in here, the Federal Reserve is completely unconstitutional and illegal, and that's one quote I'll give you. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution provides that the Congress shall have the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States and coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard weights and measures. Okay? They had this thing, National Recovery Act, in 1935, which was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And the ruling was, Congress may not abdicate or transfer to others its legitimate functions. Congress cannot constitutionally delegate its legislative authority to trade or industrial associations or groups so as to empower them to make laws. Congress is not allowed to do that. The Federal Reserve, this right here, proves the Federal Reserve is illegal and it's unconstitutional. There's only been a couple of politicians in history who have even attempted to shut this thing down. Ron Paul has made some attempt, but they have this Louis McFadden. He tried to impeach the members. He even tried to impeach the president. And he said that this thing is illegal, unconstitutional, it needs to be shut down. And they went after him. They slandered him. They started saying he was insane. And the next election, they rigged the election, and he lost in a landslide. And then he died later under mysterious circumstances. Nobody fights these people. What they're doing is completely illegal. He mentions in here what these banks do is they create money out of thin air. Now, some of you have heard this, but he documents exactly how they do it. And there's documentation. They do. This is illegal. They're counterfeiting. When you go get a loan at a bank, okay, all they're doing is making a little note in the ledger that you now owe them $10,000, and they cut you a check. And because everybody has been programmed to believe that this is real money, it's not. People honor that check. Here's another thing that is very enlightening. Okay, this is Congressman Jerry Warren is quoted in U.S. News, August 31st, 1959. Okay. Banks are different from other lending institutions. When a savings association, an insurance company, or a credit union makes a loan, it lends the very dollar that its customers have previously paid in. But when a bank makes a loan, it simply adds the borrower's deposit account to the bank in the bank by the amount of the loan. The money is not taken from anyone. It is new money recreated by the bank for the use of the borrower. I have my money in a credit union, and I would suggest you do too. Don't have anything to do with the banks if you can possibly avoid it. There are some people that have tried to create their own currency, and I think that's a good idea. If it could catch on, you can do that. It's just like trading. There's no law that says you can't trade. And people can trade amongst each other. And also I recommend working under the table. If you have employees, pay them under the table. You know, why give the government this illegal system any more money than it already has stolen from us? Everybody's been programmed to believe that it's your God-given duty to give your money to these banks and the government. Why? They're stealing, robbing you blind, and they figure that they have a right to take more. I would recommend everybody pull your money out of banks. Do not deal with banks. Deal with credit unions, or better yet, do it the old-fashioned way. Just save your money, okay? Because these banks are all a scam. They're ripping everybody off. They're destroying people. They create wars. Here's kind of an enlightening little bit of documentation I'm going to go ahead and quote. Governor Eckley is on hearings before the House Committee on Banking with Governor Wright Patman, Congressman Wright Patman. This was June 24th, 1941. He was asking him how he makes money. He said, "We created it." He goes, "Patman, out of what?" "Out of the right to issue credit money. And there's nothing behind it, is there, except our government credit? That is what money is, system is. If there were no debts, our economy system, there wouldn't be any money." You see, that's the whole thing. Our economy now is made of, as debt. It's debt-based. I like the way he says, the bank creating money by the purchase of government securities, all money is created by debt, either private or public debt. Okay, this is another, this Fletcher. Chairman Eckley, when do you think there is a possibility of returning to a free, open market instead of this pegged and artificially controlled financial market we now have? Eckley, never. Not in your lifetime or mine. See, they come right out in the middle out of this stuff because they're pretty arrogant, cocky, and they figure there's nothing anybody can do about it. It's just pure evil. And we got to find some way to stop these people. If we get a higher percentage of people to fight these guys, we could maybe start making some headway against it. But everybody's complacent. They tell you to drop your pants and bend over, and everybody drops their pants and bends over. Nobody wants to fight it. A lot of it also is everybody's been pretty much programmed that it's your God-given duty to go with this. And in recent years, the banks are never demonized. People never hear about how the banks are the ones that are the really evil members of society. Another problem is people don't understand this banking system. They don't understand how it works. Well, what they do is the Federal Reserve, what it does, it issues credit. Now that people don't understand, what does that mean, issues credit? Their member banks are allowed permission to give out a certain X amount of loans. Like a certain bank will be allowed to give out up to $100 million worth of loans or whatever, And they don't have that money. They might have some gold deposits or something in the bank, and of course they have some cash reserves, but they don't go on that. They are given permission by the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve figures out how much credit they can issue to each one of its member banks, because they know that you give too much credit out, that will cause runaway inflation and stuff like that. They want to create some inflation, but they don't want it to run away. So that's all they do, is they just give out the right to scam people with fake loans, and they call it the right to issue credit. Now, I should mention a little bit about the gold standard, because I talked about in my video on Ron Paul, I'd heard that Ron Paul wants to bring back the gold standard, and some people are saying that's bad. Well, the gold standard is a complex issue. In reality, they've never completely gotten rid of the gold standard. And these critics of Ron Paul are saying, well, the gold standard causes all these money panics. No, the gold standard doesn't cause the money panics. These banksters cause the money panics. They scammed at things in the Federal Reserve, and even before they had the Federal Reserve, if they want to get their way, they can ship all the gold out of one country, which bankrupts the country, which creates a financial panic. They did that to Germany. You've heard about all this hyperinflation in Germany. They did this intentionally because they wanted to screw over Germany. And speaking of Germany, I suppose that's another point I was going to bring out. They bankrupted all the countries of Europe prior to World War I. These war machines. So all these countries in Europe were armed to the teeth with these big war machines, but the countries were bankrupt. You can't have a war without money. So that's one of the reasons they created the Federal Reserve, so they could create money out of nothing to finance these countries so they could get their war going. Germany didn't have any money to feed their people. The people were practically starving. So they created these relief funds. And here they're pretending they're being good guys, creating relief funds for the German people. Not that they could care less about the people of Germany or any other country, but Germany had to be in the war. There was going to be no war. Germany couldn't be in the war if the people had no money for food. And there was one British nurse that said this is a scam, and British intelligence told Germany to shoot this woman as a spy, and they reluctantly did it. So that just shows you there is no separation of powers. There is no... We have a one-world government. We've had a one-world government for years. You had the same people working on both. So you had British intelligence telling Germans what to do during World War I. Wouldn't that be an act of treason? It's just all kinds of scams going on that us little people aren't supposed to know about. Eustace Mullins was threatened. They attacked him. They tried to They tried to have him thrown in an insane asylum, but they failed. Because Eustace Mullins was pretty smart. That's the thing. I mean, when you do fight these people, you do have to be kind of smart, too. You know, you got to be brave, but you got to be smart. You can fight them. I mean, there's people. Eustace Mullins was never killed. He was never thrown in an insane asylum. So you can fight these people. Yeah, I'm not going to mention too much about the propaganda horrors in the U.S. media and elsewhere. The U.S. mainstream media is nothing but propaganda. It's as bad or worse than anything they had in Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union. In the latest edition of this book, Eustace Mullins added another little section. He keeps going back to the London connection, and it mentions like British intelligence kind of, controls our intelligence. Of course, the Mossad does too. He doesn't mention that in here, but Eustace doesn't mention a lot of stuff about Jews. It's not that he doesn't know about it; he does, but he knows that if he says too much, his books will be even more censored than they already are. Bring even more heat down on them than he already had. But he's mentioning something he just recently found out called the Tavistock Institute of London. Okay, this is kind of an intelligence agency in London, and they're responsible for some pretty nasty things. Okay, during World War II, the Tavistock Institute combined with the Medical Sciences Division of the Rockefeller Foundation for esoteric experimentation with mind-altering drugs. The present drug culture of the United States is present because he wrote this in the 70s. Is traced in its entirety to this institute. Now, I'd known a lot of this stuff already, but I didn't know it was the Tavistock. I hadn't heard of the Tavistock Institute, but I know that the psychedelic drugs and stuff that was government was involved with that. There's no way this stuff could. LSD is not something you can the average guy in the street can manufacture, and then all of a sudden the streets are flooded with LSD. I figured it had to be the governments and people with money and power that were putting this on. And I know the CIA was involved, but he didn't know that British intelligence was involved behind the CIA. The LSD counterculture originated when Sandoz AG, a Swiss pharmaceutical house owned by James Paul Warburg, that's Paul Warburg's son, financed a subsidiary of the Tavistock Institute in the United States called the Institute for Policy Studies, whose director, Marcus Raskin, was appointed to the National Security Council. James Paul Warburg set up a CIA program to experiment with LSD or on CIA agents, some of who later committed suicide. Now, I had heard about this. This program, MK-Ultra, supervised by Dr. Gottlieb, resulted in huge lawsuits against the United States government by the families of the victims. The Institute for Policy Studies set up a campus subsidiary, Students for Democratic Society, SDS, devoted to drugs and revolution rather than finance SDS himself. Warburg used CIA funds, some $20 million, to promote the campus riots of the 1960s. Now, I've heard about a lot of this before. The sensitivity training and sexual encounter programs of the most radical California groups, such as Esalen Institute and its many imitators, were all developed and implemented by Tavistock Institute psychologists. Okay. The psychological testing programs and group relations training programs of the Institute were implemented in the United States by the University of Michigan and the University of California, which are hotbeds of radicalism in the drug network. It was Marquis Tavistock, 12th Duke of Bedford, whom Rudolf Hess flew to England to contact about ending World War II. And instead he ends up in a prison till the day he died. Well, I guess I'll end it now. This is kind of a summary of most of the more important basic points. There's other things and plenty of documentation to bring it up. So I strongly recommend everybody read this book. I'm going to put up a link. There's free copies on the internet. You can get, the book is out of print, and some of them are very expensive. You can get it on Amazon. I think there's a couple places that I bought my copy. It wasn't too expensive. So there are a few people that do reprint it and sell it. But I'll put up a link anyway. This is very important.